Namaskara and welcome to BIC Talks, a podcast brought to you by Bangalore International Centre, where we present conversations that move, inform, and encourage discourse.
And what I wanted to say is today, is I think the seventh day of the Navaratras, is it right? Seventh day, and it's the Kala Ratri. Okay, this is it's a terrific goddess. Okay, but it's meant to cleanse everything. Before the more benign, form of the goddess after Vijayadashmi, sort of manifests. So I think when we talk about multiple pasts in India, these pasts are so full of trauma, and my book deals with them. And a trauma which we've tried to cover up, paper over, deny. Some critics have called it negationism. But I don't think that is the way forward. My book is actually about healing, healing the wounds of the national psyche. And I don't think healing can happen through denial and negationism. Instead, a deep cleansing process is required, such as Kala Ratri, the terrific goddess of the night, requires of us. But today is also Ganga Saptami, okay? So it's the day that the Ganges is supposed to have descended to the earth. And why she came, it's a story. But she actually came to purify us and cleanse us because Sagar's sons, etc. I won't go into the myths of etc. because my book is also about history, myth, ideology, imagination, and facts. What are facts? Are they really facts, or are there only narratives and perspectives? So the first part of the book is actually called Itihas Mimamsa, the poetics of the past. And in fact, I'm making the case, as you know, I'm a student of literature, and the historians always poach on literature and try to pretend that their cognition is superior to ours. I can name many historians, they're my friends, and they look at literary texts and derive historical insights and knowledge from them, use it as an evidentiary sources. I'm doing the opposite. I'm reversing the gaze as a literary critic and a writer myself. I look at history and I see in history narratives, narratives of fact, so to speak, facts arranged in certain ways and sequences with obvious agendas. And this is not a new idea. E.H. Carr wrote about this. And of course, Hayden White is the main so-called postmodernist historian who said history has much more in common with novels and fiction than it has with non-fiction. So that's a whole section in my book. But I mention this because the poetics of the past enjoins upon us to look at these very troubled, traumatic periods in our history and try to come to terms with them. Maybe through an ethics, if not of forgetting, of forgiveness, but certainly not of denial and negationism, and also certainly not of revenge. So today also happens to be the birthday of Bhagat Singh, if you're following these things. And the reason I bring these two contexts, the context of space, the topos of space, as the Greeks called it, which is this Bangalore city and my own associations with it, and also the other topos of time, of chronology, is because really these are the two intersecting topoi, which we have to contend with if we have to look for how to go forward from here. Here's Sangeeta, fashionably late as ever, also from Alembic Glass Colony and Baldwin Girls School later. Here's to you, Sangeeta. I raised this glass of water. She's a wonderful cook, and I believe she's made us her mother's patented, I would call it a vanilla cake. Am I right? So these intersecting topoi of time and space are actually the locus of our discussion. And as I said, the purpose of the book is in a way to heal the nation. And now, obviously, that's a very lofty and idealistic, even ambitious purpose. But I call it the rebalancing of the nation's prana. The Prastavana makes a case for the rebalancing of the nation's prana. And the structure of the book, the three parts, Itihas Mimamsa, then Dakshinayan. I mean, usually we talk about Uttarayan, the sun moving into the, into the more luminous part of the zodiac and the days elongating. But my rediscovery of India, as it were, to harken back to Jawaharlal Nehru's Discovery of India, a great book, by the way, okay, is it actually happens in the Dakshin and the erasure of those marks of trauma that the nation suffered, right? So Dakshinayan, and the final part of the book is actually called, after the Bhagavad Gita, Dharma Sansthapanarthaya. So what do we do from here? How do we heal? And I've given it in a gist, which is you can't right the wrongs of history through revenge, nor can you adopt the method of principled forgetting, which is the Hindu way, not principled remembrance, which is the Jewish way. The Hindu way is a principled forgetting. But I don't think that's the right way. Or appeasement, negationism. No. We have to find a third way, neither revenge nor appeasement. So this is what my book is about, this third way. And similarly, in this face-off between Savarkar and Gandhi, or Mohan and Vinayak, to make them human, to make them accessible to all of us, in this face-off, I'm looking for a third way. I'm not looking for an either or. I'm not should I say, I'm not a fan of the people who polarize us and who say either you choose Savarkar or you choose Gandhi. I disagree. And I'm going to illustrate that in a moment. But we are going to come to 2nd of October, which is also Vijayadashmi, and you will see the amount of hate that the dead Mahatma is going to receive in India. I've been following it year after year after year. And it makes me wonder, what is it about him that is so challenging and destabilizing to us? And I leave that as a question for our audience to ponder over. But what I am arguing in my book is that this is a false choice that is being imposed upon us by people with ideological interests and political agendas, that you do not necessarily have to choose between them wholesale. But you can say, for example, that let's say on Gandhi's position on Khilafat, I disagree with Gandhi. You can say that, or with the Mahatma. And with Veer Savarkar's position on Hindutva, its definition as a Hindu is somebody whose holy land is India and birthplace is India. You can disagree. You can say instead that Hinduism is an invitation to everybody. Everyone is invited. And there are no preconditions to this invitation. It's an open system. It has no beginning, no end, no prophet, no book, no particular set of rituals, no church, and no father superior or mother superior, as the case may be. And in an open system, how can you put preconditions? Yes, you can say political Hinduism, if that's how you define Hindutva, has certain preconditions. Country first, for example. Fine. But Hinduism is a spiritual system, which is an open system. I believe it doesn't belong to any region or any country or any culture or any language or any period. It's actually synonymous, coextensive with the human quest. My mom is also a bit hard of hearing, so what happens is she may not hear what I'm saying, but she also speaks loudly. And I'm saying this because it's going to happen to all of us. We are all on the same, we are all going there. That's what I'm saying. We're all heading to the same destination, and we're all possibly arisen from the same source. This is a spiritual fact, which I think people in India or the so-called Hindus figured out long back. And just an anecdote which I mention in the book is that a lot of things happen in this country, right? And we produce so much literature. There's still about 4 million texts of Sanskrit which are not yet translated. But for whatever reason, we didn't have the same sense of, history, nor the same traditions of historiography as other people had. For example, many of you may not know this and may be surprised to know this, that, one of the greatest events in the ancient world, geopolitical events, was the conquest of a certain part of India by Alexander the Great, right? And there was a kingdom, a Greek kingdom that he left behind, which lasted for hundreds of years. And even today in Punjab, people trace their ancestry to the Greeks who had occupied or who lived there. But there's no Indian mention of Alexander. There is no Indian text, Indian source that mentions Alexander. How about that? We know that Muhammad of Ghazni invaded India 16 times or 17 times. There is no Indian record of that, those voyages or those invasions of pillage and loot and conquest. No Indian mention. Our greatest source on Muhammad Ghazni is Al-Baruni, a book which everybody must read. He tells you what's going on in India at that time. Now, does it mean that Indians were foolish or didn't know how to write or didn't record things? I disagree with that contention, because if you go to any temple, you go to Tanjavur, in this book, I have an episode in the Krishneshwar Jyotirlinga in near Aurangabad. And the inscription in the temples tells you that Ahilya Bai restored the temple. But it doesn't tell you who destroyed the temple. Why? So it's something to think about, is all I'm saying. So the third way that I'm talking about is not a way that forces you to choose between Savarkar and Gandhi wholesale. You can disagree with Gandhiji and say, he was so wrong about the Khilafat. Trying to revive the caliphate, that's what it was about, was not what the Turkish people wanted. They brought in Kemal Ataturk. And here Gandhiji, for the sake of Hindu-Muslim unity, was giving this call for Khilafat, and it resulted in a terrible massacre in Kerala, the Mopla massacre. Anyhow, so we don't agree with Gandhiji there. Similarly, as I said, there are things on which you need not agree with Savarkar, including his notion of how a Hindu is to be defined. And yet, there's so many things about Savarkar, and maybe you don't agree with his use of violence as a way to achieve political ends, though the overthrow of colonial authority through violence, I think most of us would agree, is not ethically illegitimate. It's only Gandhiji who goes to that extent. If you went to the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't consider violence as a last resort against established evil as illegitimate. And in fact, in my earlier book on Gandhiji, I showed how Gandhiji himself acknowledged that his brand of non-violence had failed. And it was Gandhiji who said, send the troops to Kashmir. So please, if you have time, look at that record. And it resulted, Nehru was reluctant. And because Gandhiji said, send the troops, the commander-in-chief of the Indian armed forces, who was a Britisher, resigned. And of course, it was a British game, to keep Pakistan, to keep Gilgit-Baltistan. We needn't go into that immediately. So the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to choose in that fashion between this and that. But you can say on certain things you agree, on certain things you disagree. So this is what I call intermediate hermeneutics, right? So let's say, I'll give you another example, Zelensky versus Putin, just to apply it to our contemporary times. You don't have to choose wholesale. Intermediate hermeneutics, or anvikshiki, as I, sort of retool it, allows you to say, on this, we disagree with Zelensky, on A, B, and C, trying to completely realign, join NATO, whatever. You may also say it's none of our business. But in the book, the things that we talk about are indeed our business. And then you can say, well, I disagree with Putin that he has to go and invade and kill so many people, there might have been other ways to do it. So intermedial hermeneutics is a way to negotiate polarities without being compelled to join one side or the other. And I believe it is a requirement of our times. So in a sense, my book is as much about how to think, as it is about, the particular topics that the book covers. Now, without further ado, let me come to the topic or the title of my talk. Savarkar and Gandhi, shall the twain ever meet? Now, the twain actually met. Let me start with that clarification. Gandhiji and Savarkar, Veer Savarkar, actually met. We used to think they met only twice. In 1909, at the India House of Shamji Krishna Varma, which was a den of revolutionaries, or a hotbed of revolutionaries, if you want to call it that. And they also met in 1927 when Gandhiji went to visit Savarkar, who was in house imprisonment after his release from the Andamans. So these two meetings are recorded. And the first meeting I mention in my book. But there was a meeting even earlier, and this was in 1906 when Gandhiji was again in London and on a mission to work for the Indian community in South Africa. And again in India House, he met Savarkar. And there are multiple records of this. And our own Bangalore boy, Vikram Sampath, has also written about it. The way that that narrative goes, or it is recounted, though we cannot be sure, is that when Gandhiji visited India House, Savarkar was cooking. And it was October, by the way. It's the same time, around the same time, and of the year in terms of the Indian calendar. And Savarkar, it seems, was making prawns. And you know which community Savarkar comes from, right? The same community that Vinoba Bhave comes from, and Nathuram Godse comes from, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale comes from, etc., and I come from. Okay, so anyhow, so we are not habitually accustomed to eating prawns. The point is that Savarkar was a very modern person. He probably even ate beef. He didn't care about vegetarianism. And Gandhiji was a sworn vegetarian already. So you can imagine that the first meeting itself didn't go off very well. But the point of departure actually came in 1909 when both of them spoke at the India House on the occasion of Vijayadashmi. And they disagreed on the means that Indians had to adopt to overthrow the British, to win freedom. And they disagreed. And that, in a way, is the point of departure in my own book. Because 1909 is the year when two great books were written by two great freedom fighters from two opposing sides of the Swaraj spectrum. So there was Gandhiji, who wrote Hind Swaraj while traveling back on the SS Kildonan Castle. It's the name of a ship, steamship. SS stands for steamship. From Southampton to South Africa. And he wrote Hind Swaraj in 19 days. First with his right hand, not first, but when his right hand was tired, he wrote with his left hand. Gandhiji was ambidextrous. He was really a Savyasachi, okay? He wrote to Kallenbach, I think I have written an original book. It is an original book. It's a very difficult book. It has its following and it has its detractors. In fact, Gopal Krishna Gokhale said that this is a book written by a madcap and Gandhi will forswear it within a year. And right up to the 1930s, Gandhiji never gave up on his ideas. He said, I will only change a few words. And one word he said he would change, and pardon my French, in the original, he had likened the British Parliament to a prostitute. It's not my word, it's Gandhiji's word. And he said, I would not use that word. So, parliamentary democracy with its pulls and pushes was not the highest form of government, according to Gandhiji. That's a different cup of tea altogether, maybe a cup of coffee for me. But he stuck to his views. But the thing about Hind Swaraj, there are two things. I mean, there are many things, but the two things that I find extraordinary is that it is a critique of modernity. And basically, Gandhi is saying that modernity is suicidal because without dharma and moksha, artha and kama will turn us all into such fervid and unrestrained consumers that we will just kill ourselves. We will destroy the environment, we will overconsume, and the planet Earth, will be uninhabitable. It will be overrun by human consumers like locusts overrunning a field. I mean, these are images that Gandhi uses. I'm not making them up. So this is one of the extraordinary things about Hind Swaraj. But the other extraordinary thing about this book is that Gandhiji comes up with a new handbook, toolkit, if you will. Toolkit has become a popular word now. Toolkit for non-violent revolution through satyagraha, which basically means you have to change. The change agent has to be you. But the bar is so high, it's so very high that I don't know who will qualify. So that's a different matter. But the same year, another extraordinary book was written, The Indian War of Independence by Veer Savarkar, sitting in the British Library, using mostly British sources. And in his book, he praises the openness of the British system because he asked the librarian that this is what he wanted to write about, the so-called mutiny. And the librarian said, yes, go for it. And he gave him all the sources. So there's something to be said about liberal democracies, and for liberal spaces such as the Bangalore International Center. We cherish them and we need to protect them. Anyhow, so he wrote this book and it was obviously banned even before it was published. It was smuggled out, it was translated and retranslated. And the long and short is we don't have the original manuscript at all. And, we have a reconstructed version of the book, but we have the first publication of the book in 1909. The Columbia University has it, and I have a digital copy. I've referred to it in my book. And in a way, of course, the book was banned, and Gandhiji's Hind Swaraj was banned. But in a sense, the first War of Independence was banned right up to 47. It was never properly published. And even thereafter, under the Congress governments, it was again very difficult to get so-called Savarkar material, okay? So there were all kinds of bans, shadow bans, if you will. But the book is not incendiary in that sense. It simply advocates a violent overthrow of the British rule, and it celebrates. Actually, pardon me if I'm being a little, irreverent. It reminded me of Kill Bill. Have you seen Kill Bill? I mean, there's a word for what that movie shows, which is streams of blood. I can't remember what philia it is. I don't know what blood is called, but, so movies which show you streams of blood, it's apparently something erotic or aesthetic at least. So Savarkar, if you want to interpret it again, as I do, it's got streams of blood. And, it's actually the goddess, if you like, who presides, talking about, very dangerous and frightening goddesses. It would be the Smashan Kali, So he celebrates those violent scenes of the Great Revolt. And he says, yes, and I quoted those passages, blood, blood, blood. So it's basically saying you win freedom, only when you can wade through rivers of blood. And we are a bit squeamish, Hindus are squeamish. Not everybody is equally squeamish. But you go to the French, national museums, it's all about blood. Nations can only be created in blood, through blood, frankly. I mean, you can ask me a question on this, but it's not a tea party. Even the Boston Tea Party was not pleasant. And Mao's revolution was not pleasant. Many leftists in India admire it, but, the bloodletting was immense. And I think Mao was one of the great killers of human history, as we now know him. 40 million people died under his watch. And the source of this is Frank Decoter's tetralogy on the years of Mao's China. And they were not killed as they were killed in Stalinist Russia or in the Nazi concentration camps, but they were killed because of the Great Leap Forward, where millions starved to death, about 20, 30 million people. And in the Cultural Revolution, many more millions died. And this is fairly well documented. Don't take my word for it or for anything I say. So these are cults which celebrate death, I feel. They are death cults. These are cults of death. So, in a sense, Savarkar also celebrates death if it leads to freedom. So, it's just a thing to think about. But it's a great book. It's the first book which looks at the revolt from the Indian point of view. And it has a galaxy of heroes and heroines which today have entered the pantheon of the Indian freedom movement. But it's Savarkar who initiates that, you might say, that revision, the revisionism, and he creates the nationalist historiography, okay? And all the other so-called nationalist historiographers, as it were, are in the wake or in the shadow of that first book. And yet, it's not just a book of history. It's also a handbook of toolkit. It's also a handbook of revolution. And he writes that he writes the book not to look at the past, but to the future and to show Indians how to overthrow the British. So it's a remarkable book. So in a way, my book is also a tale of two books, And, the two books are also contending for our attention and appreciation. So that's the second time that Gandhiji and Veer Savarkar met at the India House, and then they wrote these two books. Okay, of course, Savarkar's book was more or less already written, but Gandhiji wrote this book almost as a response. Okay, and they also met in Ratnagiri, as I said, where Savarkar warned Gandhiji that, look, your policies are going to be disastrous for India. And Gandhiji said, oh, I beg to disagree, and so on and so forth. And earlier in 1920s, Gandhiji wrote to the Viceroy to release the Savarkar brothers. Okay, there were mercy petitions of Savarkar, but they were endorsed by Gandhiji, who said these are two great patriots and they have suffered a lot, so please release them. Now, from the other side, they were not so generous towards Gandhiji. In fact, I find that nobody was generous to Gandhiji. Dr. Ambedkar was very harsh. He called Gandhi, whatever. I don't even want to go into those names. Savarkar called him a madcap. You can, almost everybody, Jinnah. There's a new book called Mohan and Muhammad by the late Meghnad Desai. And you will see that most people, most of his contemporaries, were not charitable to Gandhiji. Though Bose was very, I would say, gracious and named one of his regiments, or maybe that was ironic, the regiments of the Indian National Army. He called it a Gandhi regiment. Maybe that was a joke. We don't know. But generally, he's received short shrift from everybody. And Savarkar and the brothers Savarkar had no love lost. In fact, Baba Rao Savarkar, the elder brother, accused Gandhi of conspiring with the king of Afghanistan to invade India and make India a Muslim Rashtra. I haven't found evidence for that, but the accusation is there. It's in his book. I've read the book. And it's a very moving book, and he gives you all kinds of so-and-so told me, so-and-so told me, etc. So these were the three known encounters between them. And my book has a fourth encounter. And I don't want to be a spoiler, but it's the epilogue of my book. And it's based, the model of it is the Svargarohan Parva of the Mahabharata. So I stage an encounter between Savarkar and Gandhi in the afterlife. And not in heaven, but in hell. And Savarkar enters hell after fasting to death. I hope you know that. He fasted to death. He didn't even drink water. So both these great men did these purificatory fasts before dying. Gandhiji fasted for 13 days. And before his last, yagya for the nation, before he was shot by Nathuram, assassinated. And before that, a bomb was flung on the 20th of January, 1948, on the same premises of the Birla House. A bomb was thrown by the same set of conspirators. And the same set of conspirators whom Madanlal Pahwa said to the team interrogating him, "Fir se aayega." It's all written down, it's all recorded, I'm not making it up. "Fir se aayega," and "Fir se aaya." These are facts, right? He also fasted. Both people fasted. So in my book, you have a very emaciated Savarkar entering, hell in his topi and jacket. They wear the same clothes so that you recognize them, right? You have to stage it. And who is it that welcomes him there? It's Gandhiji. And so he says, "Oh, you're here too? My goodness, I was trying to get away from you all my life and you show up here." And there's an exchange. So please read it. Go buy the book. Okay, support a poor author. Buy the book. I'll also sign it for you. And you will see how that conversation unfolds. And I'll just say that even the Pandavas had to spend a little bit of time in hell before they qualified to be in heaven. And I call that epilogue, where all enmity ceases. So there is a space where all enmity ceases, okay? And usually it's a space in the afterlife, whether you go by the Dantean notion of the afterlife or whichever notion, because, our ideas, ideologies, beliefs, hatreds, likes, dislikes, all of these are ephemeral. They're all as transient as we are. None of these is permanent. So though old quarrels persist, these quarrels, like family quarrels, can also be resolved, is what I argue in the book. And the Swaraj spectrum, or even the Sanatana Dharma spectrum, allows for both a Savarkar and a Gandhi. In fact, for both a Nathuram and a Gandhi, which is strange because both of them swear by the Gita. Thank you very much. Thank
you. You have been listening to BIC Talks by Bangalore International Centre. If you liked what you heard, do follow us on social media. Keep up with our programming by signing up for our mailer on the website, or leave us a review on Apple Podcast or iTunes. The crew that makes these podcasts possible is S. Sarvana Raj and Ranjit Kumar on sound supervision and production. Artwork is designed by Chandani Venkataraman of Crisscross Design Studio. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast platform. It can also be accessed on our website, bangaloreinternationalcentre.org. This is Sunaina Jain signing off on behalf of everyone at BIC.